The business class cabin of Delta Flight 307 from Seattle-Tacoma to Washington, D.C. was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and silent judgment. Nathan Hale held a worn-out canvas suitcase in one hand, the other gently guiding his 8-year-old son, Liam. The boy's small backpack was patched with duct tape, a frayed stuffed koala dangling from the zipper, its ear barely hanging on. "I'm sorry, sir," the flight attendant said, her tone polite but edged with doubt as she glanced at the boarding passes. "Seat 3F is in business class. Perhaps there's been a mistake?" Nathan nodded calmly. "I know. We were upgraded last minute." Her smile was practiced but didn't reach her eyes. From across the aisle, a woman in a tailored Chanel suit leaned toward her companion, whispering just loud enough, "Are they really supposed to be sitting here?" Nathan's jaw tightened slightly as he touched the folded military envelope inside his jacket pocket, the one he never intended to show anyone. Liam looked up, his voice innocent and curious. "Dad, why are they looking at us like that?" Nathan crouched beside him, resting a steady hand on the boy's shoulder. He'd heard that question more than once, but never really had an answer. Then the thunder roared. Passengers turned toward the windows just in time to see 3 F-22 Raptors soaring into formation beside the plane, like silent sentinels. The captain's voice came over the intercom, faintly shaken. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've received a special request from the United States Air Force. There's someone on board known as Ghost Eagle they wish to honor." The cabin fell silent. Nathan's heart sank. They had found him. Soft golden light glowed from overhead panels, reflecting off polished tray tables and crystal glasses in the business class cabin. The air was warm enough, the seats wide enough, the service polished. But nothing about it made Nathan feel welcome. He and Liam quietly approached seats 3D and 3F. All around them, heads turned, eyes followed. The kind of stares wrapped in velvet but sharp like needles. Every step Liam took made his worn-out sneakers squeak slightly on the polished floor, a sound far too loud in the tense quiet. From the opposite side of the aisle, Veronica Langford, later they'd learn her name, sat stiff in a tailored Chanel suit, arms crossed, one perfectly arched eyebrow raised, as Nathan placed Liam's tattered backpack in the overhead bin. In front of them, a man in a sharp gray suit and blood-red tie was talking loudly on the phone. His name, Eric Montrose, a venture capitalist with a knack for measuring people by their shoes and wristwatches. "Definitely welfare upgrades," Eric said, deliberately loud. "Business class is getting ridiculous. What is Delta even doing anymore?" Nathan kept his head down, adjusting Liam's seatbelt, but his knuckles whitened around the strap. Liam tilted his head and asked innocently, "Dad, what's welfare?" Nathan gave a dry sniff, as if dust had gotten in his nose. He forced a smile and brushed Liam's dark brown hair gently. "It's when people think you've got nothing to offer but a handout. But don't worry, kiddo. We don't live on welfare. We live on each other." Liam nodded, even if he didn't fully understand. He turned to the window, where faint clouds drifted at eye level. In his young heart, he knew only one thing for sure. No one in this cabin wanted them there. Nathan leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes, but memory gave him no rest. The gas stove clicked manually because the ignition had broken months ago. The kitchen light flickered slightly. The only other sound came from the humidifier in the next room. Nathan, dressed in a white t-shirt and faded gray joggers, hunched over the counter, carefully stirring a pot of milk on low heat. Liam, just 5 then, lay feverish in the bedroom, flushed with a near 103-degree fever. The apartment had 2 rooms, and one wedding photo turned face down on the dresser. A prescription sat on the table. Nathan picked it up, stared at the price, then quietly folded it and set it back down. He scooped Liam into his arms with one hand, poured warm milk into a bottle with the other. When the boy threw up on his shirt, he didn't flinch, just grabbed a rag and gently wiped him clean. His eyes wandered, not to the photo, but to the empty space beside him, where Rebecca used to stand. "Excuse me, sir," came a voice. Nathan opened his eyes. Standing beside him was Cecilia Grant, the flight attendant, holding a sleek iPad in one hand and her professional smile in the other. "I just wanted to reconfirm. Are you sure you want to stay in these seats? We could find something farther back, quieter and perhaps better suited for your family situation." She emphasized the word suited just enough to make its layers of meaning land. Nathan didn't answer right away. He turned to Liam, who was sketching a jet on the back of a receipt with a broken pencil. Each line was shaky, but determined. "Thank you," Nathan said calmly, "but we'll stay. Everything's fine." His voice was composed, but his gaze sharp, cold, unflinching. Cecilia froze for a heartbeat. She seemed to want to say more, then just nodded. "Of course, sir. Let us know if you need anything." She walked away, but the way her fingers clutched the iPad trembled slightly. Later, she'd glance back at the pair of them again, but for the first time, her eyes held something more than judgment. Liam looked up, whispering, "Dad, if people want us to leave, should we?" Nathan turned, his expression softening. He placed a hand over Liam's. "Number. We only go when we decide it's right, and we have just as much right to be here as anyone else. Even if we're poor. Even if your hoodie has a rip in the sleeve." Liam giggled and pulled the sleeve over the stitched patch. Ahead of them, Eric Montrose shook his head and said into his phone, "A guy who used to fly F-16s now wedged into business class with a kid in second-hand sneakers. What a fall from grace." Nathan froze. Only he knew that wasn't just a jab. That was a hint. The cabin door sealed shut with that familiar soft click, clean and final. Flight attendants began moving down the aisle, checking seat belts, masks, and safety protocols. The fasten seatbelt sign glowed above them. Liam sat quietly by the window, chin resting on his palm, watching fog roll across the glass as the aircraft prepared for departure. Cecilia Grant returned to row 3D to 3F. Her posture remained strictly professional, but there was a stiffness to it now, as if she were bracing for something. She leaned in, speaking gently, though her eyes remained unwavering. "Mr. Hale, if I may, I'd like to offer one more suggestion. If you'd like, we could relocate you and your son to a pair of seats in economy. There's more space there for children. It might be more comfortable overall." She emphasized the word comfortable just slightly too long. Nathan turned toward her. There was no anger in his expression, no sarcasm, just silence, drawn out long enough to weigh the air around them. Then, calmly, he answered, "Thank you, but we'll stay here." Cecilia swallowed. His refusal was polite, yes, but there was something in Nathan's eyes, something quiet and steeled, that made her breath hitch. "I just thought some passengers might feel—" "We have a right to be here," Nathan interrupted, gently but firmly. "And I don't think that right should be measured by the shine of my shoes or the brand of my suitcase." Cecilia said nothing. She nodded once, took a measured step back, and turned away. But just before she walked off, Nathan caught something strange flicker in her eyes. A sadness with no name, not pity, not disdain, but something deeper, something personal. Liam unbuckled his seatbelt and leaned forward onto the fold-out tray. From his backpack, he pulled out a small plastic toy. A model F-16 fighter jet, scuffed and scratched. One wing snapped off. Paint chipped at the nose, but clearly cared for like a treasure. He gently placed it on the tray between their seats, wordless for a moment. Then, in a quiet voice, "Dad, you don't have to pretend you're okay just for me." Nathan froze. He turned to look at his son, eyes flickering with both surprise and something more fragile. "I can tell," Liam added. "You smile fake, like when Mom was sick. You smiled then too, but your eyes didn't smile." A heavy pause hung in the air between them. Only the low hum of the engines preparing to spool up filled the silence. Nathan leaned in and gently took his son's small hands in his own. "I didn't want you to worry. I just wanted you to feel safe." Liam tilted his head, calm. "I don't need safe if it means you have to hurt. I just need you to be real, even if that means you're tired or sad." Nathan leaned back into his seat, exhaling a long, quiet breath, like releasing a burden he'd held too long in his chest. "I'm tired, Liam, but not because of you. Never because of you. I'm tired because there are things I left behind, things that still follow me like shadows, even when I try to forget." Liam didn't respond. He just gripped his father's hand tighter, as if to say, "I'm still here." A few rows back, Veronica Langford glanced over. She caught the image of the father and son holding hands across the tray. For a moment, something shifted in her gaze, something like recognition. But she quickly turned away, raising her wine glass to her lips, as if to wash away whatever unfamiliar feeling had surfaced. And up front, Eric Montrose remained on his phone, now discussing defense stock trends and contractor mergers, unaware that within minutes, everything he believed about value was about to be turned inside out. The chime signaling takeoff had barely faded when it happened. A violent jolt shook the plane, so hard it felt like someone had tried to tilt the entire cabin sideways. Passengers gasped. A few shrieks rang out. Veronica Langford's glass of wine tilted and spilled onto her aquamarine silk dress. The aircraft swayed left, then right. A faint crack echoed from above. Then, thump, thump, thump. The oxygen masks dropped, one by one, dangling like yellow petals of panic from overhead compartments. Tension shattered. People screamed. One elderly passenger across the aisle flailed for his mask but couldn't reach. A child began sobbing uncontrollably. Veronica clutched her fiancé's arm, eyes wide with disbelief. Nathan stood up instantly. There was no panic in his body, no hesitation. His movement was smooth, practiced. He reached for Liam's mask first, securing it firmly, adjusting the straps to fit just right. "Breathe in slowly, Liam. We're okay," he said calmly but with urgency. The boy nodded, obeying without fear. Nathan turned to his left. An elderly man, perhaps in his 80s, was trembling, struggling to untangle the straps on his mask. Without a word, Nathan leaned over, untangled the cords, and placed the mask over the man's face, holding it steady, eyes scanning for signs of confusion or distress. All around the cabin, people stopped moving, not out of safety, out of shock, because what they were witnessing wasn't normal. At the back of the cabin, Cecilia Grant, who had just been helping a woman with mobility issues near the galley, turned back and froze. She saw Nathan, the man she'd tried to move to economy, the man in the worn jacket and duct-taped backpack. He was coordinating himself like a professional, not a passenger. His composure wasn't just calm, it was commanding. The plane rocked again, but softer this time. The turbulence began to subside, but the cabin had changed. Gone were the composed faces of upper-class calm. In their place, pale skin, clenched fists, wide, unsettled eyes. The oxygen masks dangled like reminders that money couldn't buy control. And yet, in seat 3F, Nathan Hale sat back down, hands steady, expression composed. Liam remained quiet, clutching his plastic toy plane tight in both hands. "Dad, the way you moved." "That was like a soldier," Liam whispered, eyes wide with admiration. Nathan gave a slight shrug but didn't respond. He simply patted his son's hand. Cecilia approached slowly. No longer the poised, perfectly rehearsed attendant, but a woman who had just seen something she didn't expect. "You served, didn't you?" Nathan was silent for a beat, then nodded. "I did." She didn't pry further, but her gaze had changed. Where once was suspicion and polite distance, there was now something else entirely. Recognition, not of rank, not of uniform, but of character revealed under pressure. A few passengers had begun to glance back at Nathan again, but this time, not out of disdain. They were reevaluating him, replaying the moment in their minds. What kind of man moved like that under duress? Who reached for others first? Who didn't panic? Eric Montrose, silent since the masks dropped, opened his stock portfolio app, but then quietly closed his laptop. He didn't say a word. After flying for over 30 tense minutes, the captain's voice crackled through the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to a minor pressurization issue, we'll be making an emergency landing at Joint Base Andrews for inspection. We expect to remain on the ground for about an hour." A ripple of murmurs rolled through the cabin. Some passengers groaned in frustration, others sighed about missed appointments. But Nathan went still. He knew that name. Joint Base Andrews, one of the most secure military airfields in Maryland, home to top-secret operations and VIP landings. Liam, meanwhile, pressed his face eagerly against the window, excitement lighting up his voice. "Dad, look! Fighter jets. Are those F-22s? Nathan followed his son's gaze, and his expression changed. In the distance, 3 F-22 Raptors were parked in a tight row. And then they began to move. The air inside the cabin suddenly felt heavier. Flight attendants moved quickly down the aisle, checking belts and seats, just as most passengers were still confused. 3 F-22s roared into the sky, rising with stunning speed and aligning themselves alongside the commercial aircraft in perfect formation. Passengers gasped. Some fumbled for their phones, whispering with wide eyes, unsure whether to be amazed or afraid. Eric Montrose furrowed his brow, muttering, "What the hell is this? An air show?" Then the captain's voice returned, this time slower and clearly unnerved. "We've received a special request from the United States Air Force. A military delegation will be boarding the plane to meet a passenger." The entire cabin went silent. As the plane touched down at Joint Base Andrews, the landing was buttery smooth. Too smooth. Military-grade precision. But Nathan's hands gripped the armrests tight. He knew what was coming. Out the window, a group approached. 3 individuals in pilot flight suits, helmets under their arms, walking with the kind of precision only those who've served understand. Major Sophia Chen led the trio, small in stature, spine straight as steel, eyes like cutting glass. Behind her walked Captain Diego Ruiz and Lieutenant Jake Barnes, both in full gear, faces serious, unreadable. The cabin shuddered gently as the exterior door opened. Flight attendant Cecilia Grant stood by the galley, tense and uncertain. Major Chen stepped aboard. Her gaze swept across the cabin, not consulting a list, just observing each passenger as if she were scanning for something she knew would be there. Then her voice, calm, commanding, deliberate. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Major Sophia Chen of the U.S. Air Force 1st Fighter Wing. We are here to honor an individual who served under the call sign Ghost Eagle. According to information we've received, he is currently aboard this flight. The silence was instant. Passengers exchanged confused looks. Some turned in their seats, others craned their necks, scanning for who? Eric Montrose scoffed quietly. Ghost? What? Sounds like a video game. But Liam froze. He turned toward his father, eyes wide, voice barely above a whisper. Dad, is that you? Nathan didn't answer. He couldn't. His entire body had gone rigid. Hands clenched around the armrest, his knuckles pale. Major Chen's eyes passed over him briefly, stopped, lingered, but moved on. Not out of recognition. Not yet. But something about the stillness drew her attention. The silence stretched long and taut. Snippets of hushed conversation broke the air behind them. Who is it? Ghost Eagle? Wasn't that the call sign from the Syria rescue mission? Can't be. That guy doesn't look the part. Cecilia's gaze moved to Nathan. Her eyes locked with his, and for a moment it was clear. She had suspected something. Ever since the turbulence, he wasn't like the others. Not just a quiet man with a duct-taped backpack. But she didn't speak. She simply stepped aside, quietly, giving Major Chen a clear path. The Major advanced deeper into the cabin, pausing at row 3D to 3F. Her eyes were sharper now, more focused. Then, her voice once again cut through the silence. Clearer this time, no doubt left. Ghost Eagle. If you're on this aircraft, please stand. Everyone waited. No one moved. Breaths were held. Liam's small hand slid into his father's, squeezing tight. His eyes pleaded for an answer. And Nathan. He knew that if he moved, everything would change. A quiet shuff echoed through the cabin, subtle yet thunderous in the breathless silence. Nathan Hale stood up, not dramatically, not with pride. Just a man stepping quietly out of the shadow he'd lived in for 3 long years. He reached up, gently removed the hanging oxygen mask, straightened his jacket, and took a deep breath. Major Sophia Chen stared at him, and in that moment, as though a door in memory suddenly swung open, her eyes changed. Captain Hale? She asked, her voice uncertain. You're Ghost Eagle? Nathan gave a slow nod. No bravado, no triumph. Just acceptance. The time for hiding had passed. Lieutenant Jake Barnes, the youngest of the trio, stepped forward, eyes glassy with emotion. Sir, in 2019, during a simulation training, I went into a flat spin. The alert systems failed. I lost control, and the aircraft flipped. You stepped in, overrode the system, and coached me through every maneuver. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have graduated. I wouldn't be here. His voice caught on the last word. Captain Diego Ruiz, tall, broad-shouldered, with the steely gaze of someone who'd seen war, moved closer. From his jacket, he pulled out an old, weathered flight log. The spine was soft with wear, the edges curled from sweat and time. I've kept this logbook since 2017. Syria. You flew into a storm cell over active combat to pull Delta 6 out, when no one else would. I was a rookie then. No one believed you'd make it out. But you did, and you brought everyone home. He held out the logbook with both hands, steady, reverent. If it's not too much, I'd be honored if you signed it, sir. I don't need a medal. I just want something to mark the moment I saw what real leadership looked like. Nathan accepted the logbook. His hand trembled, not from fear, but from emotion. Looking into the eyes of these young men, he saw an entire generation he had walked away from. People he'd protected, trained, and then abandoned, when the pain became too heavy. "I'm not in service anymore," Nathan said softly. His voice wasn't bitter, just tired. "We know," Sophia Chen replied, "but you're still the reason we're here, and the reason we kept going." The entire cabin had fallen silent. No one dared move, and no one looked at Nathan the same way they had when he boarded. Eric Montrose, who had scoffed at him earlier, now kept his eyes lowered. He quietly reached into his pocket, not to take a picture, but to turn off his phone. For the first time on the flight, he realized how little he actually knew. Veronica Langford, seated just across the aisle, glanced at Nathan. There was confusion in her expression. Shame, too. Her ring-laden hands tightened around her glass of water, her wine long since abandoned. But Cecilia, she didn't speak at first. Then, as if pushed by something deeper, she took a quiet step forward and said, voice barely more than a whisper, "My father was a soldier too." Nathan turned toward her, his expression softened. "He died in Fallujah, 2005. He was a pilot." Her hands trembled in front of her. I'm sorry I judged you. When I saw you board, all I could see was the face of someone who didn't come back, and I didn't want to feel that again." Nathan nodded gently. "I understand. Grief builds walls, especially when we think they'll keep us from losing more." Her chin quivered. "Thank you for not walking away. When the turbulence hit, if you hadn't been there, I think a few passengers wouldn't have made it." Nathan only smiled faintly. He didn't respond. He handed the logbook back to Ruiz, his signature now inked across the page in strong, steady letters. But he'd signed it with his left hand, because his right hand was still holding his son's. Liam hadn't said a word this whole time, but his eyes shone, not just with awe, but with a deeper kind of recognition. Not that his dad was a war hero, but that his dad was someone who showed courage when it mattered most. And in that moment, every gaze in the cabin shifted. No one saw Nathan as the man who didn't belong. No one thought of Seat 3F as a mistake. The flight still had many miles to go, but the internal journeys of every person on board had already taken a dramatic turn. The plane had just begun its descent into Las Vegas when the small screen on the first-class cabin wall suddenly flickered. A military-encoded signal. A short beep followed. General Prescott, seated in the front row, recognized it instantly. No one else knew what was happening except for the man who stood up in response to the signal. Nathan Hale. They met privately in the service galley at the front, between two compartments of coffee and hot water. General Prescott, tall, silver-haired, his uniform pressed to perfection, got straight to the point. "Nathan, I need you." Nathan said nothing. He stood still, his eyes calm and silent, like water after a storm. "We have reason to believe the recent simulation training was sabotaged, a system failure that could endanger real lives, not just models." He paused, lowering his voice. "There are only two people who've ever written that algorithm at a high enough level to truly understand it. One of them is dead. The other is standing in front of me." Nathan flinched. He knew exactly who the dead one was. Rebecca, his wife, his former teammate. The woman who spent the last 2 years of her life redesigning the Air Force's simulation system to protect pilots from the very system flaws that had killed their friends. And that same system betrayed her. "No." Nathan shook his head, his voice cracking. "I can't go back. I don't belong there anymore. I tried to save Rebecca. I rewrote the entire simulator in 48 hours, and still, I couldn't save her." He looked at Prescott, his eyes bloodshot. "I can't live through that again." General Prescott nodded gently. No surprise, no pressure. He simply placed a hand on Nathan's shoulder, like a man who had once lost himself might do. Then, at least think of those who are still alive. He turned and walked away, leaving Nathan standing in the quiet void between cabins. Moments later, Nathan returned to his seat, his face pale. He sat next to Liam, clutching his son's hand as if it were an anchor to the present. Liam looked up at him. There was real concern in his eyes, but also something else. Doubt. "Dad?" "Yeah?" Nathan replied, voice raspy. "If you're that good, why don't you help other people stay safe the way you helped me?" Nathan froze, not because the question was too deep, but because it was too honest. Liam continued, unaware that he had just touched the deepest scar. "When the plane shook earlier, you knew exactly what to do. People listen to you. If someone's in danger, and you don't help them, then how is that any different from letting them hurt like Mom did?" Nathan's chest tightened. The air around him seemed to thin. He remembered Rebecca, her eyes that day, her voice in that final headset transmission. If anyone can save these kids, it's you. He had saved them, but not her. And now, his son, the only life left from that wreckage, was asking him the same thing. If you could save them, why didn't you? No one was urging him. No one was ordering. Only the conscience of a soldier and the heart of a father waging war inside him. Liam looked up at his dad, his voice softening. "I know you're sad, but Mom wouldn't want you to just sit around being sad forever. If she were still alive, she'd want you to save people too. Like she used to, right?" Nathan bowed his head, squeezing his son's hand, as silent tears fell. Not tears of pain, but the first tear of forgiveness for himself. As the plane touched down, the afternoon sun poured through the window, lighting his face. Nathan stood up. No more hesitation. No more hiding. He walked to General Prescott, who was waiting near the VIP cabin door. "I won't return to the fight," Nathan said. "I don't need you to pick up a weapon," Prescott replied. Nathan nodded. "But I will protect those who do." For the first time in 3 years, Nathan Hale became part of something larger than himself again. Not for the military, not for honor, but because an 11-year-old boy had asked his father, "If you're that good, why aren't you saving people?" The plane had begun its final descent when suddenly a scream pierced the air from the middle of the economy cabin. I can't breathe." Heads turned as a middle-aged man lurched out of his seat, clutching his throat with both hands. His face was turning purple, eyes wide with panic. His wife beside him burst into tears, crying out, "He's having an asthma attack. The oxygen mask didn't drop. Somebody help." The tension in the cabin snapped like a wire pulled too tight. A flight attendant rushed forward, hands trembling as she fumbled with the first aid kit. But before she could react, Nathan stood up. He didn't say a word, just gave Liam a look, quiet but firm, the kind that said, "Stay here." Then, like muscle memory honed from years of training, Nathan moved down the aisle with smooth, decisive steps. Passengers instinctively parted for him, as though sensing something undeniable about him, not from a uniform, but from a presence. He knelt beside the struggling man, quickly assessing his breathing, gently tapping his cheek, and spoke clearly. "Sir, I'm going to help you breathe. I need you to trust me, okay?" No hesitation. He turned to the flight attendant. "I need an albuterol inhaler if you have one, or a backup bronchodilator from the medical kit. Urgently." I'm not sure if we still have one," the attendant stammered. "Lower compartment. Orange bag. Next to the gauze." Nathan replied, as if he had opened that kit 100 times before. He turned to the wife. Do you know if he's allergic to any medications? No, just asthma. When it's cold, it gets worse. All right. Nathan nodded. The moment he got the inhaler, he connected it to a spacer device, checked the pressure, then calmly lifted it to the man's mouth. 1, 2, 3 compressions, interspersed with assisted breathing techniques to open the airway. 10 seconds passed, each one stretching like eternity. Then, the man coughed violently and finally began to breathe again. A collective sigh swept through the cabin. The woman threw her arms around her husband, tears pouring down her face. She whispered a thank you, but Nathan only gave a slight nod. Keep him sitting upright. Make sure he doesn't lean forward. I'll alert the crew to prepare medical support on landing. As Nathan turned to return to his seat, no one said a word, but every pair of eyes followed him. A little boy in the row ahead whispered to his mom, "Is he a superhero?" An elderly man muttered under his breath, "Only someone who saved lives knows how to save one." Back at his seat, Liam stared up at his father. He whispered, almost reverently, "You don't have to be a hero, Dad. But right now, you just became one." Nathan looked at his son and smiled, not proudly, not boastfully, just peacefully, as if, for the first time in years, he had returned to who he truly was, not for recognition, not for duty, but because, when someone was in need, he simply couldn't sit still. The plane had just landed when Nathan was escorted into a private room at the airport, where General Prescott was waiting with 2 internal affairs officers. The room was quiet, save for the soft hum of the air conditioning. The general looked straight at the soldier who once served under his command. "We need you," Prescott said bluntly. "The sabotage at Andrews Base wasn't an accident. Someone deliberately tampered with the safety parameters, and the only person I trust to uncover the truth is you." Nathan stared back, his eyes a mix of gratitude and guarded weariness. "I've been out of this too long, sir. I'm not the same man anymore." "You are. Everyone on that flight just saw it." Nathan said nothing. Inside, he felt a storm, pain from the past, but also something he hadn't felt in years: purpose. Then Liam walked in, still holding the F-22 model in his hands. "Dad, if you do this, can I come with you?" Nathan turned to his son, surprised. Liam continued, slowly but firmly, "I don't want to stay behind. As long as I can go with you, and you eat dinner with me every night, even if it's just sandwiches." Nathan knelt down and hugged his son tightly. This time, it was Liam who brought him back to life. He turned to Prescott and nodded. 2 weeks. I'll assist with the investigation for 2 weeks. After that, I'll decide what comes next." General Prescott allowed himself a rare smile. There's a school for children on base, and security's tighter than this airport. Just then, the door opened. A woman in professional attire stepped inside. Veronica Langford, CEO of Langford Tech, the company that had previously funded the military simulation systems. She approached and handed Nathan a business card, her tone calm. "I want to make things right." Nathan's brow furrowed. Veronica paused briefly before adding, "My father was the one who approved the budget cuts for the simulation maintenance, and I believe he indirectly caused all this. I won't let another generation pay for that mistake." She turned to Liam, offering a gentle smile. "If you're willing, I'd like to sponsor your full education, any school you choose in the future." Liam looked up at his father, wide-eyed. Nathan studied Veronica in silence for a moment, then nodded. Not fully forgiving, but not rejecting either, because he understood. Sometimes turning back is its own kind of courage. They stepped out of the room. The last golden rays of afternoon spilled into the terminal. Liam held his father's hand, no longer anxious. Nathan walked tall, no longer burdened by guilt. He had chosen to return, not for reputation, but because for the first time in years, he knew with certainty. No one gets left behind. Not anymore. 6 months later. At a small military base in Colorado, the late afternoon sun poured over a revamped simulation facility. Everything had been upgraded. New safety systems, polished control panels, and subtle adjustments only someone who had survived a system failure would notice. Inside the control room, Nathan, now wearing an instructor's jacket, guided a group of young soldiers through emergency response drills. His voice was calm and steady, carrying the weight of lived experience. But his eyes were lighter now, no longer clouded by the same shadows. Next to him stood Liam, wearing a makeshift name tag proudly taped to his shirt. Assistant Instructor. The boy watched his father's every move with focused eyes, occasionally stepping in to gently correct a new recruit's harness strap or button. The soldiers glanced at him with a mix of amusement and quiet respect, not because he knew everything, but because of how seriously he paid attention, like a miniature version of the man beside him. When training wrapped up, the soldiers dispersed. Nathan gathered his notes while Liam helped organize simulation gear. As the evening settled in, the two returned to their modest room on base. A soft yellow light bathed the small desk where Nathan now sat, the old field notebook open in front of him. In his hand was the same pen he'd carried for years. He began to write. Dear Rebecca, today, Liam received his first assistant instructor badge. He made it himself, laminated it using the office machine. I couldn't help but laugh. There was a new recruit today, Carlos. He struggled during the emergency sim. Liam walked up and told him the exact same words you once said to me before my first deployment. Just breathe and trust that you've prepared enough. Rebecca, some things you left behind aren't just memories. They're ways of living. Maybe I'm finally learning how to be both a father and a soldier. And each night, when I sit down to write you like this, I don't feel so alone anymore. I think you're still here, in the small things. Nathan. He closed the notebook gently. Liam came out of the bathroom, hair damp and pajamas printed with little astronauts. You ready for bed? Nathan asked. Yeah, Dad. Can we read together? We can, but tonight it's your turn to tell the story. Liam grinned wide. And in that quiet room on a cold military base, a young boy's voice rose, telling stories of stars and spaceships. And a father's laughter followed, warm and full. A new legacy was being written, not with weapons, but with connection. It was just another ordinary afternoon. Nathan was tidying up his desk when a new letter arrived. A white envelope, handwriting soft and deliberate, sent from Seattle. He opened it. Dear Nathan, I've thought a lot since that day. About my lie. About my silence. And I'm sorry. My father was a Marine. He spent his whole life believing in honor, in truth. I don't know if he would have approved of the way I acted, but if he were still alive, I believe he would have wanted to shake your hand. I've enclosed a picture of my dad, the day he received his medal. Today, I think he would be smiling to see a true hero. Cecilia Grant. Nathan sat still, eyes locked on the black and white photograph. A man with sharp features, unwavering gaze. Strangely, something in him reminded Nathan of Liam. Just then, General Prescott knocked at the door. His face was serious. We've identified the one who sabotaged the simulator years ago. He didn't act alone. Nathan's fingers curled around the letter. That old feeling returned, the focused awareness of a soldier preparing for his next mission. That evening, he took Liam outside to the training yard to kick a ball around. The crescent moon hung low over the Colorado sky. The air was still. Laughter echoed across the field, but Nathan's eyes were distant. Later, he returned to his room, opened his journal, and quietly wrote, "The mission isn't over." The screen fades to black. Nathan's voice echoes in the darkness. If one day my son asks me, "What does it mean to be a hero?" I'll tell him this: it means never letting fear stop you from doing what's right. A final image flashes. Liam, standing on the field, holding a small flag proudly. Behind him, Nathan stands in silence, watching with a quiet strength. The story may have ended, but what lingers in our hearts is just the beginning. If Nathan and Liam's journey moved you, don't forget to like and share this video with someone who needs a little hope today. And most importantly, make sure to subscribe to Behind the Tale, so you never miss another story where quiet moments lead to extraordinary truths. See you in the next video. What do you think made Nathan a true hero? Let us know in the comments below.